Open up right now, this is our son's home. My parents and brother showed up at dawn trying to force their way into my apartment. The same one I threw them out of yesterday after they shamed me in front of everyone when they raised a crowbar. I swung the door open, and what I held made them shriek in terror. Moment. I was shaking, trying to process the humiliation my family had just put me through. The next, I heard her, my mother, screaming outside my apartment door, "Break down the door. This is our son's apartment." What they saw in my hands when I flung that door open, though, let's just say it made them scream in pure horror. What the hell happened to get to that point? Well, let me take you back. My name's Jelena, I'm 32, and I thought I was finally free from my family's suffocating control. I grew up in a place that looked picture perfect on the outside. You know, the kind of suburban home with immaculate landscaping and holiday decorations that made the neighbors green with envy. But behind that polished front door, our family was a different story. It was all about control, especially for my father. My dad, George Williams, he built this massive insurance business from nothing. And yeah, his drive, his work ethic, that could be admirable. But it came packaged with this unshakable belief that he knew what was best for everyone in his world. Questioning him wasn't just disagreeing, it was a direct challenge to his authority. He meticulously planned our lives with the same cold precision he used to build his empire, leaving absolutely no room for our individual dreams or desires. My mother, Evelyn, was a master of passive aggression. She never directly stood up to Dad, but she wielded guilt and emotional manipulation with surgical precision. "I just want what's best for you," she'd sigh, right after completely undermining my confidence. Her favorite line, whenever I pushed back, was, "One day you'll thank us for this." I'm still waiting for that day, by the way. Then there was Nathan, my brother. 3 years older, the golden child who could do no wrong. He mirrored Dad in every single way, from his business degree right down to his condescending attitude towards me. While Dad controlled with commands, Nathan used mockery. "Don't be so dramatic, Jelena," became his go-to catchphrase whenever I dared to express my feelings. Status, for my parents, was everything. Our family's reputation in the community was cultivated like the prize roses in our front yard. Mom was on every church committee. Dad donated generously to local charities. And us? We had to look perfect, act perfect in public. The pressure was absolutely suffocating. My education wasn't about learning. It was about achievements that reflected well on them. When I showed a real artistic talent in high school, they just dismissed it. "Art won't pay the bills," Dad declared, before steering me straight into business school. I dutifully enrolled, abandoning my art school dreams. Even my appearance wasn't my own. Mom scheduled my haircuts, picked my clothes, criticized my weight. "No one will take you seriously looking like that," she'd say if I wore something she disapproved of. By 20, I had lost all sense of my own style, my own preferences. Dating? Oh, that was another battlefield. Any boy I brought home faced an intense interrogation from my father about his family background, his career prospects. Nathan would later tell me which ones weren't good enough for our family. My first serious college boyfriend, Daniel, was deemed unsuitable because his parents were just teachers, not professionals. That relationship ended after months of my parents' subtle sabotage. The control even extended to my finances. They paid for my education, but they never let me forget it. "We invest in your future because we love you," they'd say. But that investment came with so many strings attached. They insisted on access to my bank accounts well into my 20s. Every single purchase was scrutinized, judged. My first real attempt at independence came after college. I found a marketing job at a small firm, not my father's company as expected. The fallout? Immediate. "After all we've done for you," Mom cried over the phone. Dad was more direct. "You're making a mistake that will cost you your future." For weeks, family dinners became these tribunals where my career choice was dissected, criticized. Nathan joined in, explaining how I was throwing away the connections and security our family offered. Their united front eventually wore me down. 6 months later, I resigned and took a position at my father's company. The pattern continued for years. Every single attempt to establish independence was met with resistance. When I wanted to take a solo vacation, Mom suddenly developed health concerns that required my presence. When I even mentioned moving out, Dad would pull up spreadsheets, proving why it made more financial sense to stay home. By 30, I was living in my childhood bedroom, working for my father, feeling like a teenager despite my age. I had savings I was terrified to use and dreams I was too afraid to pursue. My life looked successful from the outside, but it felt so incredibly empty inside. My college friends? They had marriages, kids, careers they chose. I had financial security, but zero freedom. The turning point hit during a therapy session I secretly started attending. Dr. Tuda Morris asked this simple question that changed everything. Whose life are you living? I had no answer, because I realized I was living my parents' vision for my life, not my own. That question haunted me for weeks until I finally made the decision. I was moving out. At 31, I was going to have my own place for the first time. Consequences be damned. I found an apartment, signed the lease without telling my family, and braced myself for the inevitable confrontation. Finding that apartment felt like falling in love. It wasn't perfect, not by conventional standards. A one-bedroom walk-up, older building, creaky floors, slightly outdated appliances. But those huge windows, flooding the living room with natural light? Perfect for my long-abandoned painting. The built-in bookshelves could finally display the books my parents considered a waste of time. The small balcony overlooking a quiet courtyard offered a peaceful retreat. Most importantly, it was mine. I signed the lease on a Tuesday, and I told my family that Sunday during our mandatory family dinner. The reaction was exactly what I expected. Dad put down his fork with deliberate slowness. An apartment at those prices? That's financially irresponsible, Jelena. My mother's eyes immediately filled with tears. But why would you want to leave home? Don't we take good care of you? Nathan scoffed. Is this another one of your independence phases? Remember when you wanted to study abroad in college? I had prepared for this, but I still felt my resolve waver. That's when I remembered Dr. Morris's words about setting boundaries. I've signed the lease, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I move in next week. I'd love your support, but I'm doing this regardless. The initial shock gave way to what I now call their helping phase. If they couldn't prevent my independence, they'd control it instead. Dad immediately offered to help with the rent, a proposition I politely declined. Mom insisted on coming with me to buy furniture, steering me towards pieces that matched their home, not my taste. Nathan volunteered to handle the moving arrangements, trying to schedule it around his convenience, not mine. I moved in despite their interference. That first night alone in my new place, I felt both terrified and exhilarating. I ordered takeout food my mother would absolutely disapprove of, sat on the floor since my furniture hadn't arrived yet, and I cried tears of pure relief. That night, I slept better than I had in years. The peaceful feeling lasted exactly 3 days. Then my parents showed up unannounced, with housewarming gifts and, of course, opinions. Mom walked through the apartment, running her finger over surfaces checking for dust, rearranging the few decorations I had placed. Dad measured the windows, declaring he'd order proper blinds to replace the ones that came with the apartment. You need to give us a key, Jelena, Dad announced as they were leaving. For emergencies. I reluctantly agreed, rationalizing that it might ease their anxiety about me living alone. What I didn't expect was how they would define emergency. Mom started dropping by while I was at work to leave home-cooked meals and clean. I'd return to find my laundry folded, my bed made differently, and things moved to where she thought they belonged. Dad used his key to let in maintenance people he hired without consulting me, resulting in new light fixtures I hadn't chosen and didn't want. The most invasive incident happened when I came home early from work with a migraine to find my parents and Nathan in my apartment, with an interior designer. They had measurement tools and fabric swatches spread across my living room. Surprise, Mom said, seemingly oblivious to my shock. We're giving your apartment a proper makeover. This designer did the Henderson's Lake House. The designer looked deeply uncomfortable as I struggled to maintain my composure. I didn't ask for a makeover. This is my home, and I like it as it is. Dad just waved away my objection. You don't know what good design is, honey. Let the professionals handle this. That evening, after they finally left, I sat in my living room feeling utterly violated. They had entered my space without permission, making decisions about my home without my consent. The parallels to how they had always treated my life choices were impossible to ignore. It was my neighbor, Olivia, who helped me see it clearly. We met in the hallway as I was struggling with groceries, and she offered to help. Over a thank you cup of coffee, I found myself spilling everything about my family's surprise redecorating committee. Olivia, a social worker about 10 years my senior, listened without judgment before speaking. Jelena, what you're describing sounds like they don't respect your boundaries. Having a key doesn't mean they can come in whenever they want. They're just trying to help, I said, automatically repeating the excuse I'd used for years. Is it helping if it makes you uncomfortable in your own home? She countered gently. Help should make your life better, not make you feel invaded. That conversation was another turning point. The next day, I changed the locks on my apartment door. I didn't tell my family immediately, knowing the confrontation would be intense. Instead, I used the time to prepare myself emotionally with Dr. Morris's guidance. Setting boundaries isn't about punishing them, she explained. It's about protecting yourself and establishing healthy relationships. But what if they never accept my boundaries? I asked, voicing my deepest fear. Then you'll have information about what kind of relationship is possible with them. Not everyone can adapt to healthy boundaries, especially if they're used to control. The inevitable confrontation came when my mother tried to let herself in while I was home and found her key didn't work. Her confused jiggling of the door handle was followed by knocking. When I opened the door, her expression shifted from confusion to hurt. My key doesn't work, Jelena. Is something wrong with your lock? I took a deep breath. I changed the locks, Mom. I should have told you, but I needed to make a point. You and Dad have been coming in without my permission, and that needs to stop. The hurt in her eyes was quickly replaced by indignation. Without permission? We're your parents. We don't need permission to look after our daughter. I'm 32 years old, Mom. I don't need looking after. And yes, you do need permission to enter my home. That conversation started a cold war that lasted weeks. My parents' calls became less frequent, though Nathan took up the mantle of trying to convince me I was overreacting. They're just trying to make your place livable, he said during one call. You've always been so sensitive. Despite the tension, I held my ground. Each day in my apartment became a small victory for my independence. I painted the living room a soft blue that my mother would hate. I bought eclectic furniture from thrift stores, not the high-end retailers my parents preferred. I hung my own artwork on the walls, pieces I had created in secret over the years. My confidence grew alongside my sense of personal style. I started reconnecting with college friends, people I'd lost touch with during years of family-enforced isolation. I joined a local art class and started painting regularly again. I even started dating without running potential partners through my family's approval system. 6 months into my independent life, I felt like a different person. My apartment had become a true reflection of who I was, not who my family wanted me to be. The only shadow over my new life was the ongoing tension with my family, which was building toward an explosion no one could have predicted. Aunt Patricia's 60th birthday celebration was marked months in advance. As my mother's only sister, Aunt Patricia held a special place, and her milestone birthday warranted a gathering of the entire extended family. Under normal circumstances, I would have dreaded it, knowing it meant hours of performative family harmony. But after 6 months of establishing my independence, I felt stronger, more capable of navigating family dynamics without losing myself. I chose my outfit carefully that morning. A navy blue dress that was professional but also expressed my personal style. I wore jewelry I had bought for myself, not the pearls my mother insisted were the only appropriate accessory for family functions. I drove to Aunt Patricia's suburban home, nervous, but determined to maintain my boundaries. The initial hour went surprisingly well. I reconnected with cousins I genuinely enjoyed but rarely saw outside these gatherings. Cousin Sophia commented on how happy I looked. Uncle David asked about my apartment with what seemed like genuine interest, not judgment. Even Aunt Patricia noticed the change in me, pulling me aside to say, "There's something different about you, Jelena. You seem lighter." I began to relax, thinking perhaps my fears had been overblown. Maybe my family could accept the new, more independent me. That hope died quickly. My father clinked his glass to gather everyone's attention during lunch. While we're all together, he announced, with the confidence of someone who always controls the room, I wanted to share some exciting news about Jelina's apartment. My body went cold. All eyes turned toward me. I had no idea what he was about to say, which was alarming enough. Evelyn and I have decided to give Jelina's apartment a complete renovation as a surprise. He beamed as if he'd just announced he'd cured cancer. We've hired Wilson Designs, the same firm that did the Johnson's Lake house. My mother jumped in enthusiastically. We've already ordered new furniture, and the painters start Monday. Wait until you see the plans. She pulled out her phone and started showing photos to nearby relatives. With growing horror, I realized she was showing pictures of my apartment, photos taken without my knowledge during their unauthorized visits. My private space was being displayed for the entire family to evaluate and critique. The current furniture is so eclectic, my mother continued, diplomatically. Everyone recognized that as her code for cheap and tasteless. Nathan added helpfully, Jelina's always had unique taste. Remember her purple hair phase in high school? The family laughed, and I felt like I was 16 again, my choices mocked as immature phases rather than expressions of my identity. I haven't agreed to any renovation, I said, my voice shaking slightly. This is the first I'm hearing about it. My father waved away my comment as if swatting a fly. It's a surprise, honey. That's why we didn't tell you. A surprise implies something the person would want, I replied, feeling my carefully constructed composure cracking. I don't want strangers in my apartment making changes I haven't approved. The table grew quiet. The tension was palpable. My mother's smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened. Jelina, this isn't the time or place to discuss this. You brought it up in front of everyone, I pointed out. When would be a better time to discuss changes to my home than when you announced them publicly? My father's expression shifted to that stern look I knew so well, the one that had silenced me countless times growing up. We're trying to help you create a proper living space. The apartment looks like a college dorm room. It looks like me, I said, my voice growing stronger. It reflects who I am, not who you want me to be. Aunt Patricia tried to diffuse the tension. The cake is ready. Shall we move to the living room? But something had broken open inside me. Years of suppressed feelings finally finding their voice. I changed the locks for a reason. I don't want you coming into my space without permission. I certainly don't want you renovating it without my consent. The shocked silence around the table made me realize how rarely anyone contradicted my father in public. My cousins studied their plates with sudden fascination. Uncle David cleared his throat uncomfortably. My mother's voice was tight with controlled anger. Jelina, you're making a scene at your aunt's birthday. I'm not the one who brought up renovating someone else's home without their permission. I shot back. Nathan jumped in, his tone condescending. Typical Jelina drama. They're trying to help you, and you're acting like they committed a crime. Entering someone's home without permission is a crime, I said. It's called breaking and entering. My father stood up, his face flushed with anger. That's enough. We have never broken into your apartment. We had a key. A key I never should have given you, because you abused the privilege. I was standing now, too. 2 years of therapy finally giving me the strength to stand my ground. My apartment is my space. Not an extension of your house, not a project for you to fix. Aunt Patricia intervened, her voice gentle but firm. George, Evelyn, perhaps this is a discussion for another time. My father nodded stiffly, his jaw clenched in barely controlled fury. Of course, Patricia. I apologize for the disruption. The conversation shifted to safer topics, but the damage was done. I felt the weight of disapproving glances from relatives who believed I had disrespected my parents. Others gave me subtle nods of support or looks of sympathy. The family had witnessed something rarely seen in our carefully controlled public image, authentic conflict. I stayed through the cake cutting, trying to avoid further disruption to Aunt Patricia's celebration. But the joy had gone out of the day. As I prepared to leave, my mother cornered me in the hallway. We'll discuss this at your apartment later, she said, her tone making it clear this was a command, not a suggestion. No, I replied simply. If you want to talk, Call first and ask if you can visit. I won't open the door otherwise. Her eyes widened at my direct refusal. This behavior needs to stop, Jelena. Your father and I have had enough. So have I said, surprising myself with my calm. That's why I'm setting boundaries. I left the gathering knowing the confrontation wasn't over, merely postponed. The drive home gave me time to prepare for what I knew would come next, but nothing could have fully prepared me for my family's reaction to my newfound independence. I barely had time to change into comfortable clothes when the buzzer to my apartment rang. Looking through the peephole, I saw my parents and Nathan standing in the hallway, their faces a mix of anger and determination. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door, but stood firmly in the doorway, making it clear I wasn't inviting them in. May I help you? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Don't be ridiculous, Jelena. Let us in. We need to talk, my father demanded, already trying to step forward. I held my ground. I told Mom I wanted advance notice before visits. This isn't a good time. My mother's face crumpled into that hurt expression that had manipulated me for years. After what you did at Patricia's party, you're going to turn us away at the door. Do you have any idea how embarrassed we were? You embarrassed yourselves by announcing renovation plans for my apartment without my consent, I replied, surprised at my own composure. Nathan stepped forward, using his height to try and intimidate me. The contractors are downstairs waiting. Dad paid a premium for them to start today. Are you really going to waste thousands of dollars because of your sudden need for independence? I looked past them and saw two men in paint-splattered clothes standing awkwardly by the building's entrance, confirming Nathan's words. The realization that they had actually brought contractors without my agreement strengthened my resolve. Yes, I am, I said. I never asked for renovations. I never agreed to renovations. Those men have no right to enter my home. My father's face reddened, a dangerous sign I recognized from childhood. This isn't about rights, Jelena. This is about what's best for you. Your apartment looks like a thrift store exploded in it. What will people think? I don't care what people think. I care what I think, and I love my apartment exactly as it is. This rebellion has gone on long enough, my father continued, his voice rising enough that a neighbor down the hall opened their door slightly. If you're going to live independently, you need to do it properly. That means a professionally designed living space. No, Dad. Living independently means making my own choices about my space, my time, and my life. It means not having to justify my decisions to you or anyone else. My mother's strategy shifted from hurt to tears, another familiar tactic. We just want to help you, Jelena. That's all we've ever wanted. Why are you pushing us away? It's breaking my heart. In the past, those tears would have shattered my resolve. Today, they strengthened it. Mom, I appreciate that you want to help, but real help would be respecting my wishes. You don't know what you want. Nathan interjected. You never have. Remember when you wanted to be a painter? How would that have paid your bills? I still paint, Nathan. My apartment is full of my artwork that you've apparently never noticed during your visits, and I pay my bills just fine with my marketing job. My father checked his watch impatiently. Enough of this nonsense. The contractors are on the clock. Let us in so they can start work. No, I said firmly. Please tell them to leave. I won't be responsible for their time since I never hired them. The door across the hall opened, and my neighbor Olivia stepped out, ostensibly to check her mail, but clearly responding to the escalating voices. Everything okay, Jelena? She asked, giving my family a pointed look. My father, ever conscious of appearances, lowered his voice. This is a family matter. It's fine, Olivia. My family was just leaving, I said, grateful for her presence. We're not leaving until this has resolved, my mother insisted. Jelena, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. I am an adult with my own living space that I pay for. I decide what happens in it. My father's patience finally snapped. If you want to be so independent, perhaps you should be fully independent. No more family support, no safety net. If that's your choice, I accept it, I replied, the words painful but necessary. You can't be serious. My mother gasped. George, she doesn't mean that. I do mean it. I would rather live without your financial support than with your constant control. Nathan stepped closer, his voice low and threatening. You're making a huge mistake, Jelena. You've always been dramatic, but this is taking it too far. The only mistake I made was not setting boundaries sooner, I replied, standing my ground despite his intimidating stance. My father pulled out his wallet and removed a credit card with my name on it, one they had given me for emergencies, but that I had deliberately not used since moving out. He held it up before tucking it back in his wallet. When you come to your senses, let us know. Until then, you're on your own. I already am, I said quietly. My mother made one last attempt, her voice breaking. Please, Jelena, let us help you. Let us in. Looking into her pleading eyes, I felt a momentary waver, the lifetime habit of giving in to keep the peace fighting against my newfound strength. But then I remembered the photos she had shown everyone, the invasion of my privacy, the complete disregard for my wishes. I love you, Mom, but no. Please respect my decision. This isn't over, my father said ominously as he finally turned to leave. We'll be back tomorrow, and I expect a more reasonable attitude. Don't come without calling first, I reminded them. And I expect you to respect my decision, even if you don't agree with it. Nathan was the last to leave, lingering in the doorway. You know they'll never give up, right? This little independence game will end eventually. It always does. This isn't a game, Nathan. This is my life. After they finally left, I closed the door and leaned against it, my legs suddenly weak. The confrontation had drained me, but underneath the exhaustion was a powerful sense of pride. I had held my boundary despite their pressure. Olivia's door opened. I heard most of that. Are you okay? I invited her in for tea, grateful for a friendly presence. They've never taken no for an answer before. I don't think they'll start now. Then you need to be prepared, she said pragmatically. First, let's change your locks again. I know a locksmith who can come today. By evening, I had new locks installed, but the knot of anxiety in my stomach wouldn't ease. My father's parting words echoed in my mind. This isn't over. Knowing my family, I suspected they would escalate rather than accept my boundary. I just didn't realize how far they would go. The pounding on my door jolted me from sleep at 6:01 in the morning. Disoriented, I fumbled for my phone to check the time, wondering who could be at my door so early. The answer came in my mother's shrill voice, penetrating the wooden door. Jelena, open this door immediately. Fully awake now, I pulled on my robe and moved toward the door, heart racing. Through the peephole, I could see my parents and Nathan in the hallway, their faces set in determined expressions. Jelena, we know you're in there. Open up. My father's commanding voice brought back a lifetime of automatic obedience, but I resisted the urge to comply. What are you doing here so early? I called through the door. I told you to call before coming over. This has gone far enough, my father replied. Your mother is worried sick about you. Open the door so we can talk properly. I'm fine and I'm not opening the door. Please leave and call me later if you want to talk. There was a murmured conversation I couldn't quite hear. Then my mother's voice again, this time with a quaver that sounded rehearsed. Jelena, honey, we're concerned about your mental health. This behavior isn't like you. The implication was clear and alarming. They were framing my independence as a mental health crisis. I'd heard of families using this tactic to regain control over adult children, and the realization that mine might go this far sent a chill through me. My mental health is fine. In fact, it's better than it's been in years. My therapist can confirm that. Therapist. My mother's genuine shock came through the door. You've been seeing a therapist without telling us? Before I could respond, I heard my father's impatient voice. This is ridiculous. Nathan, go down to the car and get the tool bag. The implication of his words hit me like a physical blow. They were planning to force their way in. Hands shaking, I picked up my phone and called 911, speaking quietly so they wouldn't hear me. I need police assistance. My family is threatening to break into my apartment. I explained to the dispatcher, giving my address. The dispatcher assured me officers would be there shortly and advised me to stay on the line. I kept the call active but muted my end so I could hear what was happening in the hallway. I can't believe it's come to this, I heard my mother say. What will the neighbors think? They'll think we're concerned parents checking on our daughter, my father replied. No one would blame us for that. Are you sure about this, Dad? Nathan's voice held a rare note of uncertainty. She's left us no choice. Break down the door. This is our son's apartment. The bizarre statement confused me until I realized he was referring to Nathan, creating a narrative where this was somehow Nathan's place that I was occupying. The level of delusion shocked me. I heard Nathan's return, followed by the metallic sound of what could only be tools being handled. The dispatcher on the phone asked if I was still there, and I unmuted to confirm I was. They have tools. I think they're actually going to try to break in, I whispered, the reality hitting me fully. Officers are 3 minutes out, the dispatcher assured me. Stay on the line. I heard a scraping sound at the doorframe. They were actually doing it. Actually attempting to force entry into my home. A lifetime of compliance and fear battled with the newfound strength I had been building. In that moment, I made a decision. I had been recording the entire exchange on my phone as evidence, and I had something else they didn't expect. Yesterday, after their visit, I had contacted a lawyer friend who had helped me file for an emergency temporary restraining order based on their harassment and threats. The paperwork had been processed remarkably quickly thanks to my friend's connections, and the official documents had been delivered late last night. The sound of metal against my doorframe grew more insistent. I could hear my mother's anxious encouragements and my father's directions to Nathan about where to apply pressure with what I assumed was a crowbar. Making a split-second decision, I positioned myself to the side of the door, restraining order in one hand, phone recording in the other. In one swift motion, I unlocked the door and pulled it open, staying carefully to the side in case they tried to rush in. The sudden opening of the door caught them off guard. Nathan stumbled forward, a crowbar indeed in his hands. My father's face registered shock, then anger, but it was my mother's reaction that would stay with me forever. As her eyes fell on the documents in my hand and the phone obviously recording their actions, her face transformed from righteous concern to pure horror. "What are you doing?" she shrieked, backing away as if I were threatening her, rather than the other way around. Defending my home from intruders, I replied calmly, holding up the restraining order. "This is a temporary restraining order prohibiting all of you from coming within 100 feet of me or my residence. You are currently in violation of that order, and you're being recorded attempting to break into my apartment with a crowbar." My father lunged forward, reaching for my phone. "Give me that. You're not recording anything." I stepped back inside my doorway. "Everything has already been uploaded to cloud storage. Breaking my phone won't delete the evidence." Nathan stood frozen, the crowbar still in his hand, his expression shifting between confusion and the dawning realization of the serious legal trouble they were in. "This is insane," my father sputtered. "We're your parents. We have every right to check on you." "No, you don't. Not by breaking down my door. Not after I've explicitly told you to leave." The elevator at the end of the hall dinged, and Officer Garcia stepped out, her hand resting cautiously near her weapon as she assessed the situation. The sight of Nathan holding a crowbar immediately put her on alert. "Put that down slowly," she instructed Nathan, who complied immediately, placing the crowbar on the floor. "Officer, there's been a misunderstanding," my father began, slipping into the charming persona he used with authorities. "We're just concerned parents checking on our daughter." Officer Garcia looked to me for confirmation. I shook my head and held out the restraining order for her to inspect. "I have a temporary restraining order against all three of them. They were attempting to break into my apartment after threatening to return yesterday when I refused to let them in." The officer reviewed the paperwork and nodded. "This appears to be an order. Do you have evidence of the break-in attempt?" I held up my phone. I recorded everything, including their statements about breaking down the door. What followed was surreal. The family that had controlled every aspect of my life for 3 decades was temporarily detained in the hallway of my apartment building. Officer Garcia took statements from all of us, and a second officer arrived to assist. My neighbor Olivia emerged from her apartment, confirming she had witnessed yesterday's confrontation and heard this morning's disturbance. My parents' version of events painted me as unstable, claiming they were worried about my mental health after erratic behavior at a family gathering. Nathan backed their story, though he seemed increasingly uncomfortable as Officer Garcia questioned the necessity of a crowbar for a wellness check. "If you are concerned about her welfare, "Why not call for a wellness check from the police?" she asked reasonably. "We didn't want to embarrass her," my mother replied, the irony of her statement apparently lost on her as she stood in a public hallway, having just screamed and attempted to break down my door. As Officer Garcia spoke with my parents, the second officer pulled me aside. "Do you feel safe in your apartment? Is there somewhere else you can stay tonight?" "I feel safe here," I assured him. "This is my home, and I'm not leaving because of their behavior." After what seemed like hours, but was probably only 45 minutes, Officer Garcia informed my parents and Nathan that they would need to come to the station to give formal statements regarding the attempted break-in. The restraining order would be enforced, meaning they could not come near my apartment or workplace. "This is outrageous," my father protested. "We've done nothing wrong." "Sir, attempting to force entry into someone's residence with a crowbar is breaking and entering, restraining order or not," Officer Garcia explained patiently. "You're fortunate your daughter is willing to let the restraining order violation be your only consequence today." As they were escorted to the elevator, my mother turned back, tears streaming down her face. "How could you do this to us, Jelena? Your own family?" The question that had controlled me for years finally had no power. "I'm not doing anything to you. I'm protecting myself." After they left, I sat on my couch in stunned silence, the adrenaline slowly draining from my system. The morning sun filtered through my curtains, illuminating the apartment that had become worth fighting for. Not because of its physical attributes, but because it represented something precious, my right to make my own choices. Officer Garcia returned to get additional details for her report. "Family situations can be the most difficult," she said sympathetically. "Do you have support people you can talk to?" I thought of Olivia next door, of Dr. Morris, of friends I had reconnected with over the past months. "Yes, I do," I said. "I'm not alone." As she left, she handed me her card. "Call if they come back or contact you against the order. We take violations seriously." After she left, I walked through my apartment, touching the furniture I had chosen, looking at the artwork I had created, feeling the space that was undeniably mine. For the first time, I understood that the morning's events weren't just about an apartment. They were about claiming my life as my own. The days following the break-in attempt took on a surreal quality. I kept expecting to wake up and find it had all been a dream, that I had imagined standing up to my family so definitively. But the police report on my coffee table and the temporary restraining order posted on my refrigerator were tangible reminders that everything had changed. The first 24 hours passed in relative quiet. Then my phone began lighting up with messages and calls, not from my immediate family, who were legally prohibited from contacting me, but from extended relatives who had been enlisted in the campaign to bring me back into the fold. "Your mother is devastated, Jelena," Aunt Patricia said when I answered her call. "She hasn't stopped crying since they came home from the police station." "I'm sorry she's upset," I replied carefully, "but they tried to break into my apartment with a crowbar. They were worried about you. George says you've been acting erratically, making wild accusations. He thinks you might need professional help." The character assassination had begun, just as Dr. Morris had warned me it might. "I am getting professional help, Aunt Patricia. I've been seeing a therapist for months, and she's helping me establish healthy boundaries." "Boundaries with your own parents? That's not how family works, Jelena." "It's how healthy families work," I countered. "And I'm not making accusations. I have recordings of everything that happened." Similar conversations played out with other relatives. Some, like Uncle David, were more receptive to my side of the story. "I always thought George was too controlling," he admitted. "But breaking and entering? That's taking it to another level." The family divide became clearer with each call. Those who had experienced my father's controlling nature themselves were more understanding. Those who benefited from their association with him or who shared his authoritarian views condemned my actions as ungrateful and rebellious. 3 days. After the incident, I received an email from my father's attorney, Robert Clean, a man I had known since childhood as a family friend. The formal legal language couldn't disguise the implicit threat. They were considering legal action against me for defamation and false reporting, claiming I had misrepresented the situation to the police. I forwarded the email to my own attorney, Jessica Winters, who had helped me obtain the restraining order. Her response was immediate and reassuring. They have no case. You have recordings, witnesses, and police reports documenting their behavior. This is an intimidation tactic. She was right, of course, but knowing the legal threat was empty didn't make it less stressful. I had been raised to fear my father's disapproval, and that conditioning didn't disappear overnight. Each email notification made my heart race. Each unknown phone number triggered anxiety about what new pressure tactic they might be employing. A week after the incident, my brother Nathan contacted me through a mutual friend, requesting to meet at a neutral location. Against Jessica's advice, I agreed, choosing a busy coffee shop where I felt safe from both physical intimidation and potential scenes. Nathan looked tired when he arrived, the confident swagger temporarily subdued. He ordered coffee and sat across from me, studying my face as if looking for signs of the sister he recognized. "You've really done it this time," he began, but without his usual condescension. "Dad's had to call in favors all over town to contain this. Do you have any idea how this looks? Like parents who couldn't control their adult daughter, so they tried to break into her apartment," I suggested mildly. He winced. "It wasn't supposed to go that way. They were genuinely worried about you." "Were you worried too, Nathan? Is that why you brought a crowbar to my door at 6 in the morning?" He had the grace to look ashamed. "Dad insisted we needed to check on you. I didn't think it would go that far, but you know how he gets when he's made up his mind." "I do know. That's why I got the restraining order." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "What's the endgame here, Jelena? You can't seriously think you can maintain this separation forever. We're family. The endgame is a relationship based on mutual respect rather than control. If that's not possible, then maybe separation is the only option." "They'll never accept that," he warned. "Mom's a wreck and Dad's obsessed with damage control. This is consuming their lives." "Their reaction isn't my responsibility," I said, repeating a phrase Dr. Morris had taught me. "They made choices that led to this situation." Nathan shook his head in disbelief. "When did you get so cold?" "Setting boundaries isn't cold, Nathan. It's healthy. Maybe someday you'll set some of your own." The look he gave me was part anger, part confusion, and something else I couldn't quite identify. Maybe curiosity. We finished our coffee in uncomfortable silence before he stood to leave. "They want you to drop the restraining order," he said finally. As a gesture of good faith. "Good faith would be respecting my boundaries without legal enforcement," I replied. "Until I see evidence of that, the order stays in place." As the weeks passed, the legal maneuvering continued. My parents had considerable resources and connections, which they deployed in increasingly concerning ways. I discovered they had contacted my employer, expressing concerns about my mental health that could impact my work performance. Fortunately, my direct supervisor, Maria, was more impressed by my professionalism than my parents' insinuations. "Your work speaks for itself," she assured me during a difficult conversation. "Whatever's happening in your personal life isn't affecting your performance." The financial consequences of my stand became apparent when I discovered my parents had been paying several of my subscription services and insurance premiums without my knowledge. These suddenly stopped, requiring me to quickly establish new accounts and payment methods. My health insurance, which had been part of a family plan, was canceled without notice, forcing me to navigate the complicated process of finding new coverage. The most painful consequence was the loss of relationships with family members who sided unquestionably with my parents. Cousins I had grown up with stopped returning my calls. Holiday invitations that had once been obligatory were conspicuously absent. The family narrative being constructed painted me as unstable, ungrateful, and influenced by radical ideas from therapy. But for every relationship lost, I seemed to gain or strengthen another. Aunt Susan, my father's sister, who had always maintained a respectful distance from family drama, unexpectedly reached out with support. "Your father was always controlling, even as a child," she told me over lunch at a restaurant far from family haunts. "Our parents encouraged it in him, but discouraged it in me. What you're doing takes courage." My friendship with Olivia deepened into something that felt more like family. We had weekly dinner nights, held spare keys to each other's apartments, and provided the kind of mutual support I had always imagined healthy families shared. Through her, I built connections with others who formed a community of chosen family. The temporary restraining order became permanent after a court hearing where the recordings of the break-in attempt were played. My parents and Nathan were present, represented by expensive attorneys who argued unsuccessfully that their actions were motivated by concern rather than control. The judge was unimpressed. Concern for an adult child's welfare does not justify attempted forcible entry into their residence, she stated firmly. The court finds sufficient evidence to grant a permanent restraining order. Leaving the courthouse, I felt a complex mixture of relief and grief. The legal victory provided protection, but also formalized the rupture in my family. As I walked to my car, I noticed my mother standing alone near the courthouse steps, my father and their attorney deep in conversations several yards away. For a moment, our eyes met, and I saw something unfamiliar in hers, not anger or manipulation, but confusion, as if she truly couldn't comprehend how we had reached this point. I looked away first, unable to bear the weight of that confusion. In that moment, I realized that my parents' controlling behavior wasn't just about power, but about a deep, desperate need to be right, to have their worldview unchallenged. Their world couldn't accommodate my independence without interpreting it as a direct rejection. The financial challenges of true independence proved significant. Without the safety net my family had provided, I needed to establish an emergency fund and plan more carefully for expenses. I picked up freelance marketing projects to supplement my income and learned to be more intentional about spending. These challenges were stressful, but also incredibly empowering. Each bill paid for my own earnings, a confirmation of my capability. 6 months after the break-in attempt, I attended a support group for adults dealing with controlling family relationships, encouraged by Dr. Morris. Sharing my story with others who truly understood was healing in a way individual therapy alone couldn't provide. The group members recognized the manipulation tactics, the guilt induction, the threats disguised as concern. No one questioned why I couldn't just get along with my family or suggested I was overreacting. The hardest part, I told the group during one session, is grieving the relationship I wished I had, while setting boundaries with the relationship I actually have. Karen, a woman in her 50s who had been estranged from her parents for decades, nodded in understanding. That grief never completely goes away, but it does change over time. It becomes less raw, more manageable. As the 1-year anniversary of my move to independence approached, I realized how much had changed, not just in my circumstances, but in me. The constant anxiety that had been my companion since childhood had diminished. I made decisions without hearing my parents' critical voices in my head. I decorated my apartment, chose my clothes, and pursued interests without considering whether they would meet with approval. I was becoming the person I might have been all along if given the space to develop naturally. Not perfect, not always confident, but authentically myself. The journey continued to have painful moments, but I no longer questioned whether it was worth the cost. 18 months after the day my family tried to break down my door, my apartment truly became my sanctuary. The space that had sparked such conflict was now transformed, not by expensive designers my parents had tried to hire, but by my own evolving sense of what made me feel at home. My paintings hung on walls painted colors I had chosen. Plants thrived on my windowsills. Books I loved filled the shelves without anyone telling me they were a waste of time. The legal battles had finally quieted. My parents had eventually accepted that their attempts to regain control through the courts were futile and expensive. The restraining order remained in place, though I had modified it to allow limited contact through approved channels, mainly email, which gave me the ability to set boundaries around when and how I engaged with them. My relationship with extended family had reached a new equilibrium. Some relatives, like Aunt Patricia, maintained polite but distant contact, carefully avoiding mention of the rift. Others, like Uncle David and Aunt Susan, had become stronger supports than ever before, offering the kind of family connection that nurtured rather than constrained. Holidays were spent with chosen family rather than out of obligation, a change that brought both sadness and relief. Nathan and I had established an uneasy truce. Our monthly coffee meetings were stilted at first, both of us unsure how to relate without our established patterns of golden child and scapegoat. Gradually, we found new conversation territory, discussing neutral topics like movies or books. During our last meeting, he had surprised me by admitting, "Sometimes I think you were right to leave. Dad's been even more controlling since you've been gone." The seed of awareness in that statement gave me hope that Nathan might someday examine his own relationship with our parents. I didn't push, knowing from experience that such realizations couldn't be forced. Professionally, I had found unexpected growth through independence. Without my father's influence dictating my career choices, I discovered I had talents and interests I had never been allowed to explore. The freelance marketing work I had taken on out of financial necessity had led to specialized projects in arts promotion, blending my creative and business skills in ways that felt authentic and fulfilling. My friendship with Olivia had deepened into something that felt more like family than just friendship. We had weekly dinner nights, held spare keys to each other's apartments, and provided the kind of mutual support I had always imagined healthy families shared. Through her, I had built connections with others who formed a community of chosen family. Dating had taken on a new dimension as well. Without my parents' approval looming over potential relationships, I was free to discover what I truly wanted in a partner. After several casual relationships, I had been dating Dylan for 6 months, a kind, creative man who respected boundaries in a way that showed me what healthy love could look like. Therapy with Dr. Morris continued, though less frequently. Our sessions focused less on crisis management and more on deeper healing, addressing the childhood patterns that still occasionally influenced my reactions to stress or conflict. Family estrangement comes with its own grief process, Dr. Morris explained during one session. You're grieving not just the relationship you had, but the one you wished you had. That's a complex loss. The grief she described came in waves. There were days when I missed the good moments with my family, the rare instances of connection and warmth that had kept me hoping for change for so many years. Mother's Day and Father's Day were particularly difficult, social media filled with celebrations of healthy parent-child relationships that highlighted the absence in my life. But alongside the grief was immense growth. I was learning to parent myself in the ways my parents never had, providing the validation, support, and unconditional acceptance I had always craved. I celebrated my own achievements, comforted myself through difficulties, and gradually replaced the critical internal voices with kinder, more compassionate ones. The process of healing showed me that their controlling behavior had never been about love, though they had framed it that way. Real love celebrates independence and growth. Real love respects boundaries and differences. Real love seeks connection without ownership. My experience had made me more aware of similar dynamics in others' lives. When my younger cousin Jamie reached out, confiding that she felt suffocated by family expectations, I was able to offer understanding without imposing solutions. I shared resources that had helped me and assured her that her feelings were valid, whatever path she chose. One unexpected area of healing came through my art. The paintings I created after the break-in attempt reflected my emotional journey, starting with dark, confined images and gradually opening to more light and space. A local gallery owner who purchased my work for a group show described it as a visual journey from confinement to freedom, not knowing the personal story behind the evolution. The most profound lesson I learned through this journey was that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for authentic relationships. Boundaries define where one person ends and another begins, creating the space for genuine connection rather than control or obligation. Far from destroying relationships, healthy boundaries make true intimacy possible. I also learned that healing isn't linear. There were days when a simple email from my mother could trigger old patterns of guilt and self-doubt. There were nights when I questioned whether complete estrangement would have been easier than the complex, limited contact I maintained. But each time I navigated these challenges, I grew stronger in my conviction that I had made the right choice for my well-being. The question of reconciliation remains open. Not the kind that would require me to surrender my independence and return to old patterns, but a new relationship built on mutual respect. Is such transformation possible? I don't know. Family systems resist change, and the longer patterns have been established, the harder they are to break. What I do know is that I am no longer willing to sacrifice my authenticity for approval. The price of admission to my life is respect for my boundaries. Those who can offer that, whether blood family or chosen family, are welcome. Those who cannot must remain at a safe distance, not as punishment, but as protection for the self I have worked so hard to reclaim. The morning my family tried to break down my door marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. What they saw in my hands that day was not just legal paperwork or a recording phone, but my reclamation of power they had never intended me to have. Their horror was the recognition that they could no longer control my narrative or my life. The journey since has been challenging but worthwhile, filled with difficult choices, but also unexpected joys. I am still discovering who I am outside of my family's expectations. Still learning to trust my own voice after decades of having it silenced. But each day brings me closer to the person I was meant to be all along. Have you ever had to set incredibly difficult boundaries with people you love, especially family? What was the hardest part for you, and how did you navigate that challenging terrain? I'd really love to hear your stories and insights in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with others who might be on similar journeys toward independence and authentic living. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your need for boundaries and respect is valid, even when others don't understand it.